Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So we've got a bonus episode today. We've got a preview from the new upcoming Magic the Gathering set, straight from Washington. War of the Spark, Storrev, Devkarin Lich.
Oh, yeah. So this particular legendary zombie elf wizard, and by the way, that's quite the tic-tac-toe right there, but this legendary zombie elf wizard is 1 black, black, green for a 5/4 trample, which is already, like, not that far off, right?
I was thinking about this, just forget about the rest of this text box, because this text box is actually pretty impressive, but just, like, there was a time when a forecasted cost black 5/5 cost you a life a turn, and everyone was signing up for that privilege. So,
yeah,
I mean,
these are different days, though.
This is not too far off from the most elite offensive creature of the first expansion of Magic the Gathering, though. It's not bad. 5/4.
Let's put it this way: a 5/4 trample for black, black, green would be incredible.
Yeah,
like it would be easier to cast than Woolly Thokdar and have trample, and legendary is actually upside in a lot of ways these days. So, like, at the very least, you're not paying even a full mana for this ability yet. And likewise, if this guy was a 6/5 trample and that was it, you'd already have some buyers. That gives us a rough framework for evaluating this ability, and that's at a pretty aggressive cost. Like a pretty powerful level. But then there's this ability: whenever Storrev, Devkarin Lich deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, return to your hand target creature or planeswalker card in your graveyard that wasn't put there this combat. So this is like a hit trigger, like Ophidian, right?
Yeah.
But it also works on planeswalkers, which is a big deal.
Yeah, that's so cool because, you're not like in this kind of Sophie's Choice situation, right? Like, it's not like I need to fight this Planeswalker, which is a card that the opponent has, versus my ability to generate card advantage on my own, right? So no matter which way you go, whether you're attacking the opponent's Gideon Black Blade or you're attacking the opponent's face, you're potentially gaining the card advantage trigger on this.
Right. And it's also notable that with Trample, the prospect of being able to actually hit for any damage is much higher. So even if Storrev dies in combat, as long as he trampled over for any, you get something back.
Oh, I think, is that one of the important reasons why they put that extra clause there that wasn't put there this combat, so that Storrev just doesn't become a resurrection machine for itself?
Right. That, and also that it's just so non-intuitive the way that the incentives become very perverse even with other creatures that, like, if they would die in combat right here, him getting them back is just really bad incentives. But yeah, this card is so, I mean, it's a 5/4 trampling Ophidian, right, with selection, right? Like the Ophidian, like the Shadow Mage Infiltrator aspect of it, every time it hits them, it's drawing a card of significant value.
Yeah, so to be super duper clear, right, 1/3 creatures of various types for 3 mana, which is 1 less than this, but a substantial amount less power and toughness, right? You're talking about 4/1.
Well, look at Thieving Magpie. Thieving Magpie was a staple for a long time.
Yeah, so flying is probably a little bit better than trample, but they're both kind of get through their combat abilities. But yet, to just get a random card off the top of your library versus a creature or planeswalker in your graveyard
of your choice.
Oh yeah. So here's the thing: like, there are a lot of, like, I think that the maybe first blush thing is like, oh, do I have a random creature in my graveyard from an earlier combat? Right? Okay, you might be getting that back. But there are all kinds of things that aim for the graveyard that you might want to get back. Like, it just in broader formats. For example, you might have played a second turn Sakura Tribe Elder that helped you to accelerate Storrev, Devkarin Lich out on 3rd turn instead of 4th turn. And getting that guy back might be a thing that you might want to do, right? He might already be in the graveyard. Your Snake Shaman there. Or you might have a cycling creature, right? So cycling creatures are pretty interesting, or even land cycling creatures, depending on what kind of stuff is available to you, because then it is becoming like not just like selection of a creature, but selection of a land, or you could actually transform it into the top card of your library if you wanted, just for regular card advantage. But I think that this ability to get a planeswalker back is really, this is kind of something special, and this is something very War of the Spark.
Yeah, that and the fact that the hit trigger actually works from hitting planeswalkers too. Yeah. Right, like we just haven't seen that before, right? Like the hit triggers also counting the planeswalkers as well as the enemy player. Absolutely.
But I was just thinking about some natural synergies, right? Like, imagine there are a huge number of planeswalkers that have already been spoiled, many of them in just black or just green, that have static abilities, but also only have minus abilities, right? So they might start with, call it 3 loyalty, but then they only have like a -1. So there's no way for them to, outside of proliferating, get loyalty back, so they're really just leveling down. And I was thinking, like, Davriel Rogue Shadow Mage might be an example, right? So this guy is 2 and a B for a 3 loyalty legendary Planeswalker Davriel, and he has the static ability at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep. If that player has 1 or fewer cards in hand, Davriel Rogue Shadow Mage deals 2 damage to them. So it's kind of like a static the Rack for 3, but as the additional ability.
More like the Pauper's Cage, really.
Sure. I was just using a shorthand, but whatever, similar kind of effect. But it has the ability -1, target player discards a card, right? So Davriel can only level down. And you can do, like, if you just have a Davriel, you can just play it for 3, use ability the first time, use ability the second time. It's basically a stupor, and they probably have to do something to it, or they might be taking some Pauper's Cage type damage. But when you combine Davriel with a card like Storrev Devkarin Lich, like, you can expend all of the loyalty on Davriel, which has no normal ability to get that loyalty back. It'll go to the graveyard. It will have taken 3 cards with it, but then Storrev gets it back, and then you can reset. And I think that's a kind of a subtle thing with this creature in this set.
Yeah, I mean, resetting the planeswalkers is definitely good, but even backwards compatible, there's lots of ways to synergize with creatures that naturally end up in that kind of a state. Like, for instance, Plague Crafter, the one from Guilds of Ravnica that's 2 and a black for a 3/2 that when it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, and each player who can't discards a card. So when you play Plague Crafter, you can sack the Plague Crafter, and it's like it's a kill spell, but then you can just get it back with this guy. So you could actually kill something every turn if you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, if all they're doing is playing a big creature every turn, you already that 2-card combo beats it entirely.
Yeah. So if you look at like just the color combination on this creature story of Devkarin Lich, it's black green, right? So Plague Crafter is a card that's already played in black-green decks. I think it's maybe lost a little bit of shine in the move towards more Sultai, but it was important before for killing 7/6 dinosaurs that weren't normally able to be targeted easily. But if you look at the kinds of cards that are often being played in Golgari decks already, like the Explore guys could be putting creatures into the graveyard by themselves, right? Like, you can play...
Oh, yeah. Jadelight Ranger does it all the time.
Yeah. Merfolk Ranchbacher, Jadelight Ranger, just dumping guys into the graveyard. You follow up with Storrev, which is a big boy, right? So, you could just be getting these creatures back that have been dumped, and you guys are really just a wild amount of card advantage, right? Like, those guys can be getting a land, or they can be getting big. This guy's already pretty big, and he can be getting more card advantage. And he's just a built-in engine. Not for nothing, how's a red deck even to kill this, right? You have to throw multiple cards at it.
Lava Coil.
Yeah, that's fair. Probably not in game 1, though.
Well, it depends on what kind of red deck. If we're talking about a mono red deck now, but, like, I think any deck using using Storrev is going to want to be prepared a little bit for the kinds of removal that's out there. But actually, I mean, black-green lends itself very well to this sort of stuff anyway. I mean, first of all, the Explore package type of stuff is already going to line up really well there. Second of all, you have access after sideboarding to stuff like Duress, and the people who actually have Lava Coil are very likely to be people that you would want Duress against anyway.
Sure.
Game one anyway, but the people who would main deck Lava Coil anyway.
And also, you're just in a color combination with Assassin's Trophy, Ravenous Chupacabra, etc. That if all you want to do is just keep hitting someone with Storrev, because not for nothing, 4 hits from Storrev is going to kill the average opponent, right? But just hitting them, whether it's through trample or getting their planeswalkers or whatever, just keep getting those guys through in order to generate card advantage. You've got great tools between Plague Crafter and targeted removal, and maybe even some sweeping, right? Like, there's plenty of stuff that does -2/-2 to white weenie tokens and will leave Storrev on the battlefield to get through.
Yeah, or if you kill everything that costs 3 or less, there's a lot of sweepers that just naturally are going to play well with this guy.
What do you think about find finality with this, right? Like, I would not mind putting 2+1/+1 counters on Storrev, sweeping all of my own guys and all of their guys, and then just getting some of them back with attacking, right? Like, that seems pretty sweet. Particularly
if one of them's a Hydra Crassus.
I wasn't even that greedy, but yes, you are correct. That would be great.
You know what's probably going to be a frequent target to get back is something like Nissa 5. Like, if you just get back, not necessary, like Vivian Reed. If you just get back Vivian Reed is such a good way to dig to cards like Devkarin Lich. But, it's also the type of card that if it sits in play, your life is really good. And if it goes to the graveyard, which it frequently does, you got a juicy, juicy target to get through. It's also worth noting, Storrev is the type of card that's going to need to get double blocked a fair amount of the time. And one of the things you can do is kill one of the 2 blockers. Like, imagine if a Goblin Chain Whirler and a 2/2, like a Legion War Boss, doesn't matter. If they block with 2, if they block with a Rekindling Phoenix and a Goblin Chain Whirler, normally you would only be able to kill one of their creatures and you wouldn't get any trample damage through. But if you use a kill spell, like if you just kill the Chain Whirler, if you kill either one in the middle of combat, not only will the Lich kill the other one and live, the extra trample damage will be very high impact.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I think it's important to note, like, even in just your example, that someone might be highly incentivized to block with both a Goblin Chain Whirler and a Rekindling Phoenix, because let's say if they only block with the Phoenix and they had the expectation to trade, you would still probably be getting some card advantage out of that exchange. And so they would want to maybe prevent that by putting a little extra toughness in the way.
Yes, yeah, and that's part of the reason for the double block is just being able to soak up that extra damage. He's definitely a threat that you're gonna overkill some amount of the time just to stop that powerful hit trigger. What's more, the ability to use the creature types on here, zombie, elf, and wizard. All 3 of those have like an above average amount of support, and that's not even counting the fact that legendary is supported a little bit too.
You can't cast this guy down very easily.
It's a lot easier to use this guy with, for instance, elf synergies than it is for wizard synergies, I think. But who knows what's possible in modern?
Get the discount on Wizard's Lightning or Wizard's Retort. That's our next project. Devkarin Lich, Wizard's Lightning, Wizard's Retort deck. All you got is a little BBGRUU. It's all good.
So how much do you think this guy is going to be able to overcome the dies to removal problem?
Oh, I think this is fine. First of all, you're not just going to play one, right? So if you're playing like multiple copies of this, I think it's relatively frequent that you're going to get one killed and you're just going to replace it with either another exactly the same creature or, another solid fatty boom boom, and they're going to start getting in at some point. Like, a deck that has this card is either positioning this card in games where the opponent doesn't have resistance to creatures specifically, or is going to be able to knock creatures out of the way with Assassin's Trophy, cast down, what have you. So I think it's fine. Its upside is so powerful, and if you have a second one, which is super plausible, right? Like just in the Vivian Reed scenario you were talking about, let's say that you play your Storrev on turn 3 or 4, and then it gets killed. You follow up with Vivian Reed. You can just dig to your next Storrev and the next 1 or 2 activations. Like that, you have a high expected value of that if you're playing 4 copies.
Sure. Here's an interesting little combo for you. What do you think of this guy with Rhythm of the Wild, or any of the Planeswalker, any of the different all the different ways that people are playing to give their creatures haste?
I mean, that's fantastic. It's awesome. I hadn't thought of that one actually because going to Jund, obviously you're going to have a green centered deck, so I think I'm a little apprehensive because you're talking about a deck that's going to need green on turn 1 a high percentage of the time in order to get paid off the way it wants to, and then have access to both red and black in the first 4 or so turns. But it's not impossible to pull off by any means, and if you do, I mean, you have a very high ceiling there. The only thing I'd say is you probably don't have any creatures in your graveyard to start.
But that's part of it. Is if you play on turn 2, I mean, Merfolk Branchwalker is the perfect one, but if you play any of your powerful 2-drops, like imagine if you were going to find some must-kill threats that start coming down early. This guy is such a great combination with them.
Oh, absolutely.
So I don't know. I could imagine there being something there. But if nothing else, I think this guy's just like a powerful body that you can throw down, and as long as your opponent's removal is going to be good anyway. Because I think one of the things that Devkarin Lich really encourages you is to play with creatures and planeswalkers that have a high impact. Both you want to get high impact cards back from your graveyard when he hits, but also you, like for instance, if Storrev eats your opponent's Vraska's Contempt, that's all the better for Doom Whisperer who comes down next turn.
Yep.
And so like... Okay, yeah.
Well, I was kind of imagining if Storrev, let's say, is the top of your curve. I mean, it doesn't have to strictly, actually be the top of your mana curve, right? But what I mean by that is, kind of the Jamie Wakefield philosophy of it's the last fatty that kills you. If you just play a bunch of guys going to Storrev and you're just aggressively trading in combat or trading with your opponent's removal, and they might be spent, right? Like people have a limited amount of creature removal. They're out of their creatures, right? They're drawing air. You play Storrev. You just get paid back for all the attrition magic that you have played for the first 4 or 5 turns of the game. Like that I think is a really attractive scenario for this card.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to even worry about getting too over the top with how much you get paid back. I think if you ever hit them with Devkarin Lich, you're well ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just was thinking about, the example that you had a Doom Whisperer. If you just got a Doom Whisperer, right, like the ability to just activate that thing and put specific fuel into the graveyard is really exciting with this card, isn't it? Like,
definitely.
It's weird. Like, you could be using the Doom Whisperer, putting really good cards in the graveyard rather than keeping them, which might be confusing to your opponent until he realizes that, every time that he's hitting with Storrev, like, you're just kind of tutoring. It's awesome.
Additionally, I think if you pair Devkarin Lich with Judith, I think is going to be already, like, Judith is a very must-kill threat for a lot of people, and it comes down the turn before the Lich anyway. But I also think that the kinds of cards you're likely to surround Devkarin Lich with are cards that Judith would play well with anyway. And all this stuff, I think, plays well as sort of a preamble to, and this is super high up the curve, but Liliana Dreadhorde General, such an exciting curve topper, can completely take over a game, but also, even if your opponent can answer it, obviously that's just such a high impact card to get back with your Lich.
Well, I think that Liliana Dreadhorde General is exciting to play with this card for a couple of reasons. One of them is because the opponent's really highly incentivized to kill it because it's very powerful. But separately it works well, right? Like you can that -4 ability of each player sacrificing creatures. Like as long as you're not sacrificing Storrev, you're drawing cards for sacrificing creatures on your side. You're getting blockers out of the way on their side, but you're also giving Storrev something to do.
Yeah,
that's really cool. You're just like, you're not busy enough. Why don't you go get me back that elf? That merfolk elf.
Another kind of exciting application is how much you can use the same planeswalker twice in one turn with Storrev. So, for instance, let's suppose, this is going to be a slightly convoluted example, but let's suppose with Liliana, you end up at a spot where you've ticked up a little bit. And so it's realistic, or she's even taking damage, but it's realistic to imagine yourself being at 4 loyalty and then just using her minus ability exactly, or it could be any Planeswalker's ultimate, you know what I mean? But just using the Planeswalker's minus ability for exactly enough to kill the walker, hopefully clearing a path, and then you attack, get back the same walker, replay it in the same turn, and use it again. In case, sometimes you just need to use 2 modes of the same walker.
Yeah, sure.
Especially if your walker is Nico Bolas, but...
man. I don't know about if these guys go in the same deck, but if they do, wow. You want to talk about Nico Bolas for a second? I can talk about Nico Bolas.
Yeah, Nico Bolas is just such a big game. Blue, black, red. Bolas is a planeswalker with 4 loyalty, but 4 abilities. His first ability, Nico Bolas, Dragon God, has all loyalty abilities of all other planeswalkers on the battlefield. Wow. That's already pretty unreal.
Here's the thing, if they've got, right? It's not just if you've got. It's just unreal. But yes, that's the static ability on this. And I think probably in tomorrow's episode we'll talk about more planeswalkers with static abilities. But I do want to talk about Nico Bolas for a second, even if we don't dwell on it for forever. And he's got 3 other abilities and 4 loyalty to start.
Yeah, that +1 ability, you draw a card, each opponent exiles a card from their hand or a permanent they control. Also, that's already
unbelievable.
That ability is incredible.
I haven't actually done this yet, but I actually wanted to go through the Gatherer database. I think that might be the best +1 ability of any planeswalker ever. It's really, really strong.
Yeah, this +1 ability is better than Teferi's +1 ability.
It's like the best part of Karn and the best part of Jace, right? It's really good. Yeah. I think that +1 ability is unbelievable. And so it's funny, the whole Nico Bolas has all the loyalty abilities of other planeswalkers because he's also got such incredible abilities himself that you're frequently gonna want, the bar is pretty high to steal somebody's ability just because of how good his abilities are. But there's going to be plenty of spots where tactically you're going to be very excited to use some other ability, particularly an opponent's ability. How about that -3 ability?
Talk about the perfect ability for this card. When you already have that +1 ability that is so always good, that +1 ability is so just agnostic of board state, that +1 ability is generally just good. So what you want out of the rest of his abilities are extremely specialized, powerful in tactical use. And -3 to destroy target creature or planeswalker is amazing. That's just so good for fighting against other planeswalkers and for fighting against creatures, really. But just the ability for Nico Bolas's ability to get its money is outrageous.
I can't even fathom. So you're investing the casting cost in this card. You get a 4 loyalty planeswalker out of it. And your almost your worst case scenario is to take out their best thing and still be left with a planeswalker that has loyalty, right?
That draws 2 cards a turn. You're drawing a card and getting rid of something every turn.
Yeah, And then the -8 ability is, I mean, I don't know if you get there. The other abilities are so good.
So this -3, the thing to remember is Garrick Apex Predator. Garrick Apex Predator was a format, like it was like a powerful part of the pillar of the format, and it cost 7
in their sideboard just to fight, you know, against attrition against other mid-range or ramping decks, right? Like I remember the green ramp deck of the era might have had it in the sideboard. The Abzan deck of the era might have had it in the sideboard just to go bigger than other people's. It wasn't actually necessarily bigger than Ugin, but to fight Ugin or to fight other Garricks, you know, fight Chandras. And this thing does it for substantially less mana cost.
So I think that -8, each opponent that doesn't control a legendary creature or planeswalker loses the game. I think that ability is way more important. It may surprise you how much more important that ability is than meets the eye. You see, you're not ticking up Nicol Bolas with the +1 as the primary way to get to the -8. It's an incidental thing, but in reality, if you +1 4 times, you're already just so happy, right? The real thing is that Nicol Bolas can use any of the loyalty abilities of all other planeswalkers on the battlefield. So instead, a picture that you've got a planeswalker who has an ability that gains loyalty. Yeah. You know, like, so, for instance, just in Standard, you could use, like, whether it's Dovin Ban, right? Like if Dovin Grand Arbiter is, if you get to use Dovin's +1 ability, you could easily gain enough loyalty in one shot so that you're threatening Nicol Bolas' ultimate in the second turn.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So just if you can borrow other people's plus abilities to just accelerate that loyalty, and then, I mean, plus there's proliferates, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying that you don't even need to, like, branch out. Now, it depends on what proliferate stuff exists. That could be true, but that's going to be true for every planeswalker. They're not going to cost proliferate so specifically good with Nicol Bolas. What I mean is that Nicol Bolas is so like, Nicol Bolas can exploit other planeswalkers who have plus loyalty abilities in a way that no other card in the game can. And the ability to take other cards that are good on their, you know, just for their own merits. Like, you could be interested in Dovin Grand Arbiter just to play with it, right? Like, it's just a fine card. And I know that the color requirements might seem wild, but there's already some Planeswalker fixing we've seen in the form of Interplanar Beacon.
Oh, yeah, awesome Planeswalker fixing already, for sure.
I could imagine a Nicol Bolas deck that the only red card is Nicol Bolas, or perhaps the only white card is Teferi and Dovin, you know? Like, who knows, right? Like, there's a lot of ways you could do it. Another one is Huatli Radiant Champion, which is as hard to put together of color combination as they come. But if you have – you could literally just go Huatli Radiant Champion into Nicol Bolas and immediately be there.
Oh, wow. You could just use Huatli?
Like, you can – I mean, you see what I mean, though, right?
Yeah,
like
that's cool.
Like, you use Huatli's +1 ability with Nicol Bolas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other thing is, like, Nicol Bolas is in Grixis, which is just like all the counters and kill spells colors, right? If you just want to kill all of their legendary creatures and planeswalkers and then just keep your lead, there's no better color combination for that, right? Just hold your lead for 4 turns. I think that's also an underrated aspect here, because I mean, he has a really legitimate, just straight up win the game condition.
Oh yeah, dude. What about Oath of Teferi?
What about Oath of Teferi? So we're probably gonna go back to an Esperish deck, and then in this imagination, this is the only red card because Oath of Teferi is actually not going to be able to borrow some of the Planeswalker fixing.
Right. So you're playing an Esper deck that splashes red for Bolas, right? And then if you have Oath of Teferi Bolas is all. I mean, Bolas is a messed up card to begin with, but if you ever were to assemble Dovin Bolas, you instantly just win. Like you can use Bolas, you can use Dovin's plus ability to get Bolas up to ultimate, and then immediately ultimate Bolas and just kill your opponent. Now that's a lot of stuff already going right, but like I just think a lot of these pieces kind of fit together anyway. Even if you end up just using Bolas and Dovin together without the fanciness, I don't know. But in terms of high impact cards to get back, you could do a lot worse than Bolas. So even if you're playing more like a 4-color good stuff deck, which may not necessarily be completely out of the question with the kind of green mana fixing we've currently got available, but as long as you've got high impact planeswalkers and creatures to get back at all, then this Lich is a major threat every time it attacks.
I think that just to spin it back to our preview card, I think this is going to be a meaningful card in the format for Standard, and I can actually imagine it having wider applications in bigger formats. It's a little expensive for some of those wider formats, but its ability is really, really powerful.
I also think cast down is at such a powerful place in Standard right now, and to a lesser degree even Modern. But cast down is such a powerful card in Standard. Having a must kill threat that it's also a legend is actually this is a pretty good time for it.
I agree. Yep, absolutely.
Oh, one last thing we didn't talk about is Storrev is deceptive. Storrev's actually quite good with pump spells.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Right? Because that trample.
Right. So, it may sound a little silly, but, and you had already mentioned Find Finality, but there's a variety of times and ways and places in which you're going to have incidental ways to either put +1/+1 counters on Storrev or be able to play a trick that allows, in particular, any kind of fast pumping is particularly good here. Both letting him live, take down bigger things or more things, and then also trample over for that extra damage.
I think that we should kind of leave that dangling for now, and the possibility of pump spells on this card, because they do make
Double
sense.
Strike.
But because I think tomorrow there's probably going to be some cards that are like, hey, maybe there's a reason that we might want to play some pump spells in Standard or maybe even Modern. So tune in tomorrow.
All right, awesome, dude. See you then.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, so jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to